everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. This is chapter 21, Cain and Abel. Interesting stuff. Before we begin, and before we even go into the Tehillim, I would like to dedicate this class and this lesson and all the goodness that might come from it to the Refuah Shlema, to my grandparents. Meshulam Zisha ben Sarah and Shifra Tzvia bat Esther Hensha. Refuah Shlema to them. Okay, so let's get into it. We'll start with the Tehillim. Hallelu et Adonai kol goim shabechuhu kol haumim ki gavar aleinu chasdo ve'emet Adonai leolam. Hallelujah. All right, Cain and Abel. So we're about to get yet another perspective with great detail and something to think about as well regarding what happened in the Garden of Eden. All the understandings that our sages bring forth are from the Torah itself. Obviously, we've already deduced that this is how they come up with their commentary. It's not like I think so or the Lord told me. Compare and contrast apples with oranges. There's ways to learn that. Hopefully you're understanding that from these teachings, which is how you can extrapolate from the thought process and gain understanding through patterns. That's what they do. But you can never base it on nothing. Even if you have an idea, you come up, you see something, you have a wonderful idea, it needs to be rooted somewhere. Otherwise, it connects to nothing. If it does not connect to Torah, it connects to nothing. This is why we were given this. If you want to know where everything goes and everything comes back to, this is the root of everything. The problem is that people begin to build their own ideas on things that have no root, no foundation, no base, and that is how replacement theology is born, or other religions or whatnot. And if you're doing this, you're flirting with idolatrous thoughts already, which will lead you way off the path. It is said in Genesis 3:3, but of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden. Umi pri ha'etz asher betoch hagan. This is our point of interest. Now let's start to look at the angles over here. It was taught in a Braita. Rabbi Zeira said, of the fruit of the tree, like we just read, here, tree only means man, as we discussed, right? Who is compared to a tree, as it said, ki ha'adam etz hasadeh, for man is a tree of the field, Deuteronomy 20:19, right? Right. We can get behind this idea because it is rooted in the Torah. Okay, but also we will come back, we'll come back later to visit this, just letting you know. Does this mean that every single time the Torah mentions a tree, is it referring to man? No. Or man tree? No. You have to also understand how to look at these things. Nor is it true that every time it mentions man, a tree doesn't even necessarily need to be involved, right? You have to know where to compare and contrast these things. This is where you need to learn with someone to be able to show you what's practical and what's a metaphor. Which is in the midst of the garden, like we just read, in the midst of the garden is here merely a euphemism, say our sages. Okay, so we have the tree, and man is likened to the tree, specifically the tree of what? Of the field. But our verse speaks of a tree in the garden. Okay. The garden being more well-kept, more beautiful, closed off, very specific, right? And something that the man had been given responsibility to tend to. You see where I'm going with this? Who or what is the garden? The garden is the woman. More specifically, it was Eve, as the tree would be Adam. In this instance, this is what is going on there. Again, hold on to this because later on we'll be using this again. So let's back that up now by scripture, okay? Which is in the midst of the garden, for garden means here merely woman, who is compared to a garden, as it is said, a garden locked up is my sister bride. Not sister bride, but achoti chala, all right? From Song of Songs 4:12. I explained to you how God would refer to Israel, my sister, my bride. In other words, there are different aspects to look at. What is, for instance, your bride? Your bride, you are not supposed to, for tznius reasons, you're not supposed to display any kind of public display of affections with your wife. In other words, you cannot touch your wife in public, but you can touch your sister in public. You understand? So when God refers to Israel, my sister, my bride, it means both in public and in private. That's what that means. It's not weird, okay? It's just, yeah. Okay, we explained this way in the past. Now we're already able to start broadening our horizons and get a fresh take on things which will all coincide with what we've already been learning. And so, just as with this garden, whatever is sown therein, okay, Eve, whatever is sown therein, it produces and brings forth. So, with this woman, what seed she receives, she conceives and bears through sexual intercourse. Like we've seen, whatever is sown in her, if the seed comes from a bad source, in this case, Satan, the serpent, the product is bad. Cain. If the seed comes from a good source, in this case, Adam, the product is good. Abel. And still, despite all this, regardless of whatever any of us come from, wherever any of us come from, or whatever generational curses we may carry, because let's be honest, most of us do. We have to do a tikkun for generations going back, as we've already learned this plenty of times. In the here and now, we always have an opportunity to stop that. In other words, where does the buck stop? Does it stop with you, or are you going to start passing it along to the next generation after you? We can stop it right now in our lifetime, and we could start to turn it around, turning it back. In other words, we are now doing tshuva and tikkun for ourselves, for our fathers, for our grandfathers, and going all the way back. This is what we could do, and it is up to us. No one says that we have to keep passing this along. Let's continue. Ba Elea, he came to her. This is what it says. Who came to her? Satan, riding upon the serpent, and she conceived Cain. And afterwards she conceived Abel, as it is said in Genesis 4:1. Now the man knew his wife Eve. V'ha'adam yada et Chava ishto. What did he know? Did you pay attention to the last class? Adam knew Adam knew what his wife had done, that she was pregnant. In other words, he knew what went down over there. I believe this is also called adultery, if you think about it, right? She saw his image, and it was not from the lower worlds, but from the supernal worlds. She looked up at the image, and she said, I have acquired a man with the Lord. Whose image did she look upon? Let's read Targum Yonatan from Genesis 4:1 and see what he says. And the man knew his wife. I'm just translating it from its Aramaic to Hebrew to English. Okay. And the man knew his wife Eve, that she coveted the angel of the Lord, this would be Satan, and she was impregnated by Satan, and she gave birth to Cain, and then she said, I have acquired a man with the Lord. Meaning, because again, a lot of times you'll see, let's say when Jacob wrestled with the angel, and people are like, oh yeah, it was God, or the other guy, right? No, it wasn't, because when you wrestle with angels, when you see angels, in a sense, they are Elohim. We could see the same thing, like we said plenty of times. Look at the story of Samson, right? The angel came to Manoach and his wife, and they say, oh no, what are we going to do? We're going to die, for surely we have seen Elohim. No, but they saw an angel. So you have to also know what and how to read these things. So she gave birth to Cain, then she said, I've acquired a man with the Lord. Meaning Cain looked nothing like Adam, and more like a combination of Satan and the serpent. Even Abel, who was truly the first son of Adam, did not look exactly like his father, because Eve still carried that infestation within her from the serpent. Rabbi Ishmael says, from Seth sprouted forth all the generations. Seth, we're talking about now, okay? Not Abel, meaning afterwards. From Seth sprouted forth all the generations of the righteous, and from Cain sprouted forth all the generations of the wicked, the rebellious and the transgressors against the heavens. who say, we don't need a drop of your rain. As said in Job 21:14, they said to God, turn away from us. We do not wish to know your ways. Big no-no. Now, think about why this is absolutely the worst thing. Because you recognize God and yet you reject him. In other words, you know there's no way out of this and yet you're still willful. You're fighting a losing battle. This is also the entire concept of Amalek and the Erev Rav. They know that they're fighting a losing battle and yet still they go for it. This is also why Amalek was likened to bees in the Torah. We said this. Now, who doesn't love bees? Everybody loves bees. We all love bees, honey and everything. They're cute little things and they actually keep the ecosystem alive. We need bees. The bees are dying, so is our world. Okay. But a bee has a stinger. It's a one-shot thing. Now, a bee's stinger cannot kill you. It'll hurt you. It'll be annoying, but it can't kill you. And yet, it will kill himself to hurt you. This is the concept of Amalek. They threw themselves in the fire to try and kill us just to scare us. You understand? Think suicide bombers today, right? Yeah, even though they're Ishmael, for the most part, they are from the seed of Amalek. I will kill myself, I will kill my children just to hurt you. That's what we're dealing with today. Rabbi Miasha said, Cain was born and his twin sister with him, and Abel was born and his twin sister with him. Now, if you read different interpretations of this, for instance, in the Zohar, it says that Cain was born with one twin girl, one twin sister. Abel had two females born with him, which was another cause of Cain's jealousy towards Abel. But again, we're talking about Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer right now. Rabbi Ishmael said to him, meaning to Rabbi Miasha, it has already been said in Leviticus 20:17, and a man who takes his sister, whether his father's daughter or his mother's daughter, and he sees her nakedness and she sees his nakedness, it is a disgraceful act. In other words, this is a no-no, right? Obviously. Okay, so you got your sister wife over there. So if you're thinking, well, the events in Leviticus have yet to take place, so how could this be relevant to them? I would say to you, was the Torah not created before the world was? Adam knew the Torah. Again, Adam knew everything, all of existence. He had that within him. Again, God shut that up and started to remove these things from him. But Adam knew everything. As the generations continued, they also knew things, but then they started to lose it. Therefore, the Torah itself predates, if you will, the events that take place within the Torah. If you really want to think about it, then you should be asking, well, then if the Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, was already written before the world was, meaning all the events and commands, the ups and the downs, the challenges, the obstacles, the successes, and the failures, okay, because nothing really is a failure, it's all part of the plan, all of it has already been written before the world was, then what are we doing here? Think about it like this then. Torah is beyond space and time. Like we said, I know it's not a cop-out because it's true. We're trying to make some logic of something that is beyond logic, right? This is what created it. You're thinking creator and creation. You have to think above that. So the Torah is not bound by space or time, nor does it ever change, right? Because it doesn't have to. We're the only ones that change. We know this. Everything from the moment the emanation of creation was formed. See what I did there? Emanation of creation was formed. Okay, the 3 worlds. And even prior to that, as well as eternally after, has been squeezed into space and time for us. This is all for us. This is where God chose Israel to receive eternity. Our reality is but a blip in this grand scale of things, and it is anything but simple. Those who grasp onto the Torah for dear life, like we said, are from here because we attach ourselves to eternity. In other words, we're connecting ourselves to the Torah, and therefore we become eternal with the eternal. But that blip, which is the tiny little drop in the bucket of what is reality and existence, is 6,000 years, 6,000 of our years, and we may know that it actually means everything. I realize that I'm getting very philosophical here, but if we had any kind of idea, the gift that has been imparted to us, all we would be doing day and night is reading and studying Torah. That's all we would be doing. That's it. If we had an idea, okay? Now look at the people who actually do this or have done this. The reason they do it is because they have a greater understanding of things than you or I. There are people that all they do, all day, they wake up in the morning, they pray, they study Torah, they pray, they study Torah, they pray, they sleep a little bit, they wake up, they study Torah, and they pray. That is all they do. Can any of us do that? Are all of us meant to do that? No, we have different jobs. These are specific people that do this, right? So can I say, you know what? I'm not going to work anymore. I'm not going to do anything anymore. The Lord is going to provide and I'm going to do this. Maybe so, but do I even believe that enough for myself to do that? You understand? So the people that actually did this, have done this, and do this today, that's the kind of faith they have, because they're putting everything aside and they're straight up in Torah. These are sages. All right, so let's focus. From these events that took place with Cain and Abel, you should know that there were no other women in the world to be their wives, and so God allowed it. As said in Psalms 89:3, Ki amarti olam chesed yibaneh. What is chesed? Is loving kindness, right? No, I'm not expecting anything in return. It's just giving. For I said, forever it will be built with kindness, as the heavens with which you establish your faithfulness, right? So what does this mean exactly? Does this mean that even before the prohibition of being intimate with one's sister was given in Leviticus, does that mean that it was okay to do so? Of course not. That's just gross. Okay, but you have to understand, there was no one else in the world at the time. They were not even aware of this necessary dynamic. They're like, oh, well, here, a couple was born. There you go. Okay, no problem. That's what it was. We're talking about like the first 5, 6, 7 people in the world. There have been a few times that a sin was permissible. I have to do that in order to achieve the greater good. For instance, Lot and his daughters, right? Gross. But I mean, this was a heinous act, and yet it was done out of innocence, good intent, since they truly believed there was no one else in the world. All they knew was that Sodom and Gomorrah was going to be destroyed. That we're destroying this place. They saw fire and brimstone. That was it. They thought the world was going back to the days of old, and that was it. They were the only 3 people alive. And they had to repopulate the world. So let's get them drunk and let's do what we need to do. Was this act ever redeemed? The Moabites and the Ammonites are never welcome in the house of God for all of eternity. Only the women are permitted, as we to convert. See Ruth, the great-grandmother of King David. What about Jacob marrying 2 sisters, right? You're not supposed to marry 2 sisters. This was a very, very big no-no, which is why Satan was able to harm him in his socket. Right? Because he couldn't find anything that was wrong with him. If you find a perfect tzaddik, there's nothing that you can do. All the forces in the universe, it goes against the laws that God put into play. A perfect tzaddik, nothing and no one can touch him. He commands angels. But in this case, there was one thing that Jacob did. And again, we also understand that it had to happen that way. Joseph was actually supposed to be the firstborn of all the tribes. Not Reuben, Joseph, from Rachel. All the 12 tribes were supposed to come from Rachel. Now, who threw a monkey wrench into the mix to throw off the final redemption? Meaning, here's Rachel. Oh, it's Leah, right. Okay, fine, take Rachel also. This was Lavan. He knew this. The Lavan in his house, the White House. Thank you. He saw what was going to happen and he tried to foil the plan. He might have extended it a little bit, but again, everything still works out. He just delayed it. The point is, God understands what we are working with. Don't you go on breaking the Torah right now if you don't have to. You see what I'm saying? Like, for instance, pikuach nefesh doche Shabbat, right? If someone needs medical attention, right, you break Shabbat to save that person's life. When I was in the army, and they tell us, okay, you got to go on the Jeep, you got to do patrol, you got to carry your weapon, do all this stuff. You're doing it for the safety of the country, and you actually have rabbis, military rabbis and whatever. They say, okay, this you're allowed to do, this you're not allowed to do on Shabbat, right? But anything that comes to human life, that takes precedence over everything and anything. Because life, we cherish life. This is what is most important. So again, God understands what it is that we are working with. Now, how do I know this? Because we are still here. We're still alive. We're still breathing. We're still kicking, sort of, right? In the land of Israel, at the tail end of a 2,000-year exile, and at the tail end of the 6,000 years. Technically speaking, we should have been dead a long, long time ago. Why? Because we got no atonement for sin. Where are all the sacrifices? We have no temple. How could it be? And they didn't have a temple before then. How could it be? But God gave the prophets instructions for times like these. Since we cannot bring sacrifices to the temple because we don't have a temple. It's one thing if we have a temple, we don't go do it. Oy vavoy. We don't have a temple right now. We recite the order that which they were given at the appropriate times, and that makes up for the action in the meantime. Again, when Mashiach comes and the temple will be restored physically and spiritually, then all of a sudden, you could read Psalms 50 or 51, I believe. Then you will accept sacrifice and bulls and all this, as David says. In the end times, in the end days, before we flip over into the 7th millennia, the temple should be standing for at least 40 years. And everyone in Israel has to give these sacrifices because everyone has to complete everything in the Torah. So, Bechesed nivra haolam ad shelo nitna haTorah. In kindness the world was created until the Torah was given. Now there's an order to things. Now you can really start doing a restoration and a rectification for the world. Rabbi Yossi says Cain and Abel were twins, as said in Genesis 4:1. In other words, they were both in the womb together. Now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, right? Meaning, if she just bore Cain, it would have said, and she bore Cain. As we can see in the continuation, in the meantime, she bore again in verse 2, and she continued to bear his brother Abel. In other words, and she conceived and bore Abel. No, she conceived and bore Cain and continued to bear his brother Abel. That's where he's saying, and it makes sense, right? This hints at two possible pregnancies at the same time, maybe. Cain and his twin sister in one separate section, and Abel and his twin sister or sisters in their separate section. Now, we discussed in the beginning how two and up, this was, I forgot how long ago, it was like last month or something, but one of the earlier teachings, it says two went up to the bed and 7 came down. So if Adam and Eve went up to the bed and 7 came down, that means that's an extra 5 heads, right? So we got Cain and his twin sister and Abel and his twin sisters. Okay, so that's 7. In other words, this is not coming out of thin air. So this was one of the possibilities. Now I'm wondering who was Cain's sister wife? What did she look like? Did she have his tendencies? Yeah, you understand? She was the literal daughter of Satan after all. So, I mean, now if these two are mating and they're producing offspring, what might that look like? Now, Cain was a man who loved the ground in order to sow seed, and Abel was a man who loved to tend the sheep. Now, if we compare the description of Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer to Genesis 4:2, we'll see the order of the introduction and choice of work has actually changed, choice of wording, excuse me. And nowhere do we see love. He loved to do this and he loved to do that. So let's read 4:2. And Abel was a shepherd of flocks, and Cain was a tiller of soil, as opposed to, now Cain was a man who loved the ground, so it starts with Cain, and he loved the ground in order to sow seed, and Abel's a man who loved to tend sheep. But in the Torah, it's reversed, or rather, here it is reversed, because the Torah, that's your pillar always, that never changes. Oh, and just a side note, when we read Vayehi Hevel, right? Vayehi Hevel ro'etzon v'kain ha'oved adama. The Vayehi, it's foreshadowing trouble, specifically for Abel, right? Vayehi b'mei Achashverosh, right? Oy vey, Vayehi, during the days of Achashverosh, the Jews are about to get in trouble. Vayehi bayom hashmini. I read this thing. It's, that's my Bar Mitzvah Parsha, the Parshat Shmini. Vayhi bayom hashmini kara Moshe la'Aaron u'lbanav u'leziknei Yisrael. It says that at that moment, on that 8th day, God and the angels have not rejoiced since the very beginning since the creation of man, because that was a chance to restore everything. But what happened? Why Vayhi? Because Nadav and Avihu died over there. So there is still a Vayhi even in that time, you see? Okay. The Radal brings forth some great points over here. Why was Cain mentioned first in our text? Because he was the oldest and he had first dibs, basically, on what it is that he wanted to do. So he chose the ground to sow seed and to work the ground. But here's the thing that we all kind of miss. The world, as it was created, was absolutely perfect. Work was minimal. Everything was pretty much growing by itself. There was no need to till, plant, or sow. It was not like the Garden of... It was a little bit like, obviously less than the Garden of Eden. Nevertheless, we're talking about a perfect world. Here you go. The dew is going to come from the ground. It's going to get... We learned all about it in the 6 days of creation. So Cain chose to do what exactly? You understand? He's like, yeah, I'll do this job. Like, what job, dude? You're going to pick the fruit? They're growing by themselves. There's nothing that you have to do. The one gave of his produce as food to the other, and the latter gave of his produce as food for his brother. So in other words, you eat the thing and here's the sheep. Did Cain really have to give of his produce to Abel's sheep? Was there a lack of space in the world? Come on. There were 7 people in the entire world at the time, and there was more than enough of everything and anything for everyone. God put it in his children's heart that they should work together and help one another. The Radal says, al yedei hachiluf, through an exchange, meaning no money. This is a barter system, dude. If everybody's got their area of expertise and everyone is helping out everyone, there's plenty enough for everyone. Plenty enough? Double positive? Is that? All right, whatever. The evening of the festival of Passover arrived. Adam called his sons and said to them, in this night, in the future, Israel will bring the paschal offerings. Bring ye also offerings before your Creator. Some people had a difficult time understanding that Abraham had a seder. He had the Seder night when the 3 angels came to him. He had a Seder to commemorate what was going to happen about 2,000 years before he did this. Adam was already doing it. You see this? I told you, Adam knew everything. I just also want to read Targum Yonatan to you regarding this verse, and then we'll continue. So this is specifically in regards to the timing of all of this, as we can read in verse 3. Now it came to pass at the end of days. Vayhi, right? Not a good thing. Miketz Yamim, at the end of days, which is different than Daniel's Ketz Hayamin. Ketz Hayamin is the end of the right. Yamim is the days, okay? In other words, you want to be at the Ketz Hayamin, the end of the right. That means right, chesed. That means you will be resurrected, okay? Now it came to pass at the end of days, this is the 14th of Nisan. Adam told his sons, in the future, Israel are going to bring an offering pleasing to the Creator, as it is an et ratzon, a time of great favor. Like we said, we have many atei ratzon. Motzei Shabbat is an et ratzon. Right now, we just had Rosh Chodesh Elul on Friday night, Shabbat and Sunday up until Sunday night. Great et ratzon, by the way. Chodesh Tov to everyone. I forgot to tell you that last time. Now, you do the same, and God will favor you. So it's similar to what we read in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. It's also similar to what we read in the Torah. Cain brought the remnants of his meal, of roasted grain and seed of flax, and Abel brought of the firstlings of his sheep and of their fat, he lambs, which had not been shorn of their wool. In other words, you are getting everything perfect and the best of the best. The offering of Cain was detested. The word in Hebrew is nitav, to'eva, an abomination, detesting. And the offering of Abel was accepted, where it says vaisha, meaning it was vayosha is like it's, it's like saved, salvation. So vaisha, in other words, bring it, it's coming with me, it's accepted. As it is said, and the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Genesis 4:4. I don't know if that's how it's, that's the translation in English. But the verses are in Genesis 4:3, 4, and 5. So let's read those. Now it came to the pass at the end of days that Cain brought of the fruit of the soil an offering to the Lord. And Abel he too brought of the firstborn of his flocks and of their fattest. And the Lord turned to Abel and to his offering. So it says, Vayisha Hashem el hevel ve'el minchato. But to Cain and his offering he did not turn, and it annoyed Cain. Vayichar. That means it's bad. Vayichar af Hashem. That's where you see af. God's nostrils flared up. So it's not a good thing. It exceedingly annoyed Cain, and his countenance just fell. Vayiplu panav, his lipol, to fall, panav, his face, so his countenance fell. In the Torah, it doesn't specifically say what Cain offered, just that it was of the fruit of the land. But when we compare that to what Abel brought, specifically the firstborn of his flocks and of their fattest, by default, we already know that Cain did not give the best of his produce, right? In other words, we use our common sense over here. That, and of course, since God did not accept his offering, that's also why I know that it wasn't the best of the best. Now, here's a teachable moment for us all. Give your most prized possession, your favorite thing, the best of what you have, to God. Are you giving it up because you think God is going to reward you for it? Or are you doing so because you know that this will close the gap between you and your Creator? You see, if you give and you think you're actually losing something, that's a problem. But you're giving in order to draw near, in which case what you're giving, you'll notice it's actually insignificant in the large scale of things. You see, it's not just what you give, but it's also how you give and what is behind the giving itself. You think God doesn't know this. It's very hard to give things out of the pureness of our heart because we are so tainted from this world. You understand? When kids do things, it's genuine. They don't know, smaller children, right? They do things because they just want to do this. They don't expect anything back. Like when kids share. Now, before you say you share, sharing is caring, right? You'll see them do something. Why? Because I have this and I want them to have it too. That's pure love right there. There's no malice in there. There's not expectations. They're not, mommy, look at me. You understand? None of that stuff. It's pure. Where did that go? Life. So obviously God knows what is behind all the intent of everything that is what we do. This is why it is so tough for the wicked to give stuff up also, because they believe with all their hearts that it was they and they alone who attained or acquired their wealth or their possessions, or even if they're not wealthy and they don't have a lot of possessions. If you have no connection to God, you believe that everything you got is on your own, is made, this is mine, mine, mine. Okay. They don't have to be super rich, like I said, it's whatever they have. So Proverbs 15:8 says, the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination of the Lord. To'avat Hashem, right? Just what we read before in the Hebrew. Zevach reshaim to'avat Hashem. Abomination. It's disgusting. Utfilat yesharim retzono. But the prayer of the upright is his will. What was the word used in our text? The offering of Cain was detested. Nitav, it was an abomination. God knew where Cain came from. He knew his thoughts. He knew his schemes and his future actions, obviously. What and how he gave was only a manifestation of who he really was, and yet still God told him, you can do better. You're still part of my creatures, part of my creation. You can do better. Now, I just want to read what the text says in Hebrew, because for some of you, you'll have an idea of what's coming. Hevi Cain mutar me'achlo. Mutar is like yeter, it's the leftovers, extra. Me'achlo. Kaliot zera pishtan. Vehevi Evel מבכורות צונו ומחלביהם כבשים שלא נגזזו לצמר, ונתעב מנחת קין ונרצת מנחת הבל, shene'emar vayisha Hashem el hevel ve'el minchato. Cain brought linen, Abel brought wool. Anybody? Okay, we'll get to this. We have already seen at least 2 laws that the children of Israel are going to hold by based on these actions. But again, this was written, the laws of the Torah have been written before these actions even took place. See what I'm saying? Outside of space and time, don't limit yourself. Remove that box. There is no box. There is no spoon. Rabbi Joshua ben Karcha says, the Holy One, blessed be He, said, let not the offerings of Cain and Abel ever mix with one another, even in the weaving of a garment, as it is said in Deuteronomy 22:11, you shall not wear a mixture of wool and linen together. You see, we are in the world of good and evil, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We must separate that. It is us that must do that within every single thing that you get. Even if it's all good, it's not all good. It is a constant mixture. Our job in this world is to make that separation and to return back to how things were. God created everything after its own kind. Today in the world, everything, there is no separation. No borders, no genders, no this is, no that is. Everything is 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. World government, order, and so on and so forth, leading up to our teaching next week. Okay, and even if it be combined, let it not come upon you, as it is said in Leviticus 19:19. And a garment which has a mixture of shatnez shall not come upon you. We have a prohibition about this. And when you buy clothing, especially in Jewish stores, you'll see on the label, there's no shatnez here. In other words, it's checked for shatnez, chas v'shalom, to break this mitzvah from the Torah. This command goes back from the days of Cain and Abel. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for everything that most people just dismiss. And just one more verse based on Abel's offering, okay? Deuteronomy 15:9. Every firstborn male that is born of your cattle, of your flock, you shall sanctify to the Lord, your God. You shall neither work for the firstborn of your ox, nor shear the firstborn of your flock. That's exactly what he did. You understand? So we see where Abel's head spirit was at, if you will, and we see where Cain's was, the leftover. He probably had some dinner and he said, you know what, here, let me just empty my plate. Here you go. So, what came first? The Torah or these events that would later on be given to Israel? See? These things are inevitable. And again, I say this, the entire Torah is written based on the choices that we would make, and no matter what we do, God's will always prevails. So, get with it. Rabbi Tzadok said, great envy and hatred entered Cain's heart against his brother Abel because his offering had been accepted. Now, the Radal tells us that this envy actually led to hate. You need a reason to hate. The hate is like the final thing before you actually start to take action, right? Hate is the result of envy, anger, jealousy, and so on. In fact, Cain's name speaks to that. Cain in Hebrew, kin'ah. Kin'ah is jealousy. And in this case of Cain, envy leads to hate. Hate leads to anger, and anger leads to the dark side, and, murder afterwards. And have you ever noticed this before? Genesis 4:7, if you improve, meaning if you better yourself, you will be lifted up from your current state as the son of Satan, perhaps. And if you do not improve, however, at the entrance, sin is lying, it is crouching, right? Chatat rovetz, scheming, that is what it is. And to you it is longing, but you can rule over it. It is there, it will be over, it will be right there, next to you, behind you, around you, everywhere, all around you, till the day you die. But you can still rule over it. Sin is crouching, waiting, ambushing, but most importantly, premeditating, okay? Scheming. Now let's read Deuteronomy 19:11. I'm going off script, but whatever. 19:11. But if a man hates his fellow, lies within wait for him, rises up against him, and strikes him mortally. You see how okay, that's murder one. We get this, right? The very definition of sin that God gave Cain, what sin is and what it does, This is scheming to destroy the life of someone else, and you don't need to physically murder them in order to kill them. You can ruin them financially, destroy their good name, embarrass them in public. There's no shortage, unfortunately, of ways to actually kill a person. What does Cain do in the very next verse after God warned him what, where, and how? And Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. Cain just became the definition of sin according to what God told him. You see this. And also a lesson for us all. We don't have to go to such extremes to sin. There are plenty of do's and don'ts that count as sin. But I want you to see that when we sin, specifically when it comes to premeditating, okay, in any capacity, we then become sin. See that? And sin is something that will be cleansed and will no longer be. Think about that, okay? You have to rid yourself of this before it is completely gone. Who or what are you holding on to? Great envy and hatred entered Cain's heart against his brother Abel because his offering had been accepted, not only on this account, but also because Abel's twin sister was the most beautiful of women, of all like three of them, right? And he desired her in his heart. Yeah, so it's always about a woman. Great. I mean, okay. In other texts, like we spoke of, it says that Cain was jealous that Abel had two sister wives, as opposed to just his one sister wife. But let's go with what we have before us. Moreover, he said, I will slay Abel, my brother, and I will take his twin sister from him, as it is said in Genesis 4:8. And Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against his brother Abel and slew him. Now, what do we now going back to our opening point, meaning Eve was the garden, man is the tree of the field. The tree in the middle of the field, tree of the garden, okay, in the field. So then what now is the field? The field is woman, who is compared to a field. Now let's bring back the verse that we discussed earlier in Deuteronomy 20:19. Ki ha'adam etz hasadeh, for man is the tree of the field. In the Garden of Eden, the center of the garden was the tree of life, which is what sustained everything, and Eve was likened to the garden. The tree of life sustained everything. Eve was the only woman. I'm just thinking, okay. Eve was the only woman who was taken from man, but afterwards all men come from women, right? Is that politically correct to say? See what I'm saying? Okay. And so the field woman produces a tree, man. Furthermore, the Hebrew says, Vayakam Cain el Hevel, and Cain rose up to Abel, as opposed to Vayakam Cain al Hevel, and Cain rose up upon Abel. This is how we read every single time someone is going to come up. Vayakum alav vayamod alav. He stood upon him, came up upon him. He came to him. So if we read the verse again, and Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother. Vayakam Cain el Hevel. It says it doesn't say against el to Hevel his brother, and then he killed him. We see that there is a break in the text. Okay. As it was not Cain who was in the field with Abel. So again, and Cain spoke to Abel his brother, comma, even in the Ta'amim, in the musical notes in the Torah, Vayomer Kail en el Hevel achiv, comma, Vayehi be'otam basadeh. And it came to pass when they were in the field. Who was in the field? Okay, now you get it. So when Cain came to kill him, Abel was quite literally in the field, okay? Meaning his wife. You get it? Okay, so when Cain came to kill him, Abel was kind of in the middle of something. It's disrespectful. He took the stone and he embedded it in the forehead of Abel and he slew him. So in the forehead, right? How? Okay, let's not even go there. We're going to need the Hebrew for the comparison. לקח האבן וטבע במצחו של הבל והרגו, שנאמר, ויקם קין אל הבל אחיו ויהרגו. So וטבע means to sink. It's funny because tava and teva, nature, is the same exact word. Teva and tava. Okay, and let's say hu tava, he drowned, he sank. Now let's read 1 Samuel 17:49. Vatitba ha'even b'mitzcho, and the stone sank into his forehead. This is David and Goliath. And David stretched out his hand to the bag, and he took a stone, and he slung it, and he hit the Philistine in his forehead, and the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. Okay, so first, if you sink a stone into someone's forehead, you must be standing obviously right in front of them, meaning that they can, see it coming. You're not opposing, you're not coming at me like, a gangster from the back or something like that. Second, the only way David could have hit Goliath's forehead is if it was exposed, but Goliath was wearing a helmet. Our sages say that David gave Goliath the evil eye. He looked at him, he's like, you uncircumcised Philistine, you want to keep talking about the God of Israel? No problem. And he caused the copper or bronze helmet to open up a gap right over there, right in his forehead, and that's where he flung the stone right there at him. And David had every intent in doing so, just like Cain, i.e. premeditated. Obviously, that's not murder, right? Okay. Strengthening the point that Cain is guilty of murder one, or quite literally the very number one murder, right? The first murder to ever take place in the history of the world. Interestingly enough, in the Zohar, it says that Cain didn't know how to separate the nefesh, or the life force, right, which is in the blood, from the body. And so he began to bite Abel, not only on his neck, but he started biting him everywhere to try and make him not be alive anymore, spilling his blood in the process, which is way more brutal than a one-shot stone to the skull. This is also where we get the stories that Cain was essentially the first vampire. Okay, you guys actually heard this stuff? Okay, well, it's not necessarily true, because in many of the other species mentioned in the holy texts, they are called arpadim. Arpad is vampires. In other words, there are such things. They're not as, magical and as sexy as Hollywood makes them out to be, trust me. They came during the generation of the flood. But we will see something else very soon that may fit into classic vampire lore. I just thought it was interesting, so we'll bring that up soon. Rabbi Yochanan said, Cain did not know that the secrets are revealed before the Holy One, blessed be He. He didn't know. He goes, well, if God's not talking to me or He's not here, then clearly He doesn't see or He doesn't know, let alone what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, where I'm putting Him, right? This did not only include the known realm, meaning what you can see, but like I said, our thoughts as well, the subconscious even. So what did he do? What did Cain do? He took the corpse of his brother, he dug a hole, and he buried him in the earth. But again, it doesn't say that how deep was the hole. Now there's plenty of different commentaries saying he took him and he just put him off, not in the public eye, he threw him between some rocks, in some trees, or he was in the ground, he tried to make his body disappear, so he put earth on him. He didn't exactly know what to do. The Holy One, blessed be He, said, where is Abel your brother? He answered and said, Master of the universe, you appointed me to keep the field and vineyard. But to be my brother's keeper, you did not appoint me, as is said in Genesis 4:9. And the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? Yes, I am. Nino Brown, New Jack City. Classic. Abel's flock would graze elsewhere, so this incident took place possibly in Cain's territory. One of the other commentaries says that Cain was angry with Abel that his sheep were eating from his field, right? You got plenty of room, you don't need to come here. But again, God wanted them to work together. Okay, so there's plenty of reasons, right? None of them justified, obviously. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, I heard that you murdered. The voice of your brother's blood is screaming to me. Meaning, I can hear this. The Radal says that it is said, you have murdered and also inherited, as seen in 1 Kings 21:19. And God is telling Elijah to speak to Ahab, right? And so you shall speak to him, saying, so said the Lord, have you murdered and also inherited? And you shall speak to him, saying, thus said the Lord, in the place that the dogs have licked the blood of Naboth, shall the dogs lick your blood, even yours. Okay, so this is, like we said, 1 Kings 21:19. Have you murdered and also inherited? Inherited what in our case? Your brother's land, his flocks, and that which you actually really coveted, his wife, his woman. Since Cain heard this, he was frightened. There was no reply. He didn't answer back. He didn't say, like Adam and Eve, well, you gave him the hotter wife, so what do you want me to do? He didn't say any of these things, right? There was no blaming or shifting the blame or anything like that. When Cain was silent, which in this case, it meant confession. In other words, it's like, busted, own it. Yep, I have nothing to say for myself. I did that. Guilty. At that moment, he felt terrible regret for what he had done, as well as for having the terrible thoughts that led up to that moment. Now, here's a question that I'm asking. I know the sages say that he had regret and did do tshuva, but then would he have not had regret right after the fact? In other words, oh my goodness, I killed my brother out of a jealous rage or something like that. Why would he need God to bust him in order for that to happen? So did he regret that what he did, or did he regret getting caught? You see, I'm trying to make sense of this thing, because God can, well, where's your brother? I know you killed him. Oh no, there's the regret. Was there no regret before? Okay. Based on the text in the Torah, as well as what our sages say, the regret, remorse, and tshuva was genuine, since God did not kill Cain, but he gave him a punishment, but it was a long-lasting punishment, meaning the regrets and remorse and the tshuva, it wasn't complete because it was premeditated and because he was scared. If we do tshuva out of fear, it's a much lower level of doing tshuva out of love, you see? Nevertheless, tshuva is tshuva. So that's even the beginning of the process, because what starts off by fear could very well end up in love. So what is the purpose of punishment? It is correction. What is the proof? His descendants turning from the dark side to the light, which is why God kept him alive to begin with. It's like, you just killed him, I'm done, you're done. That's it. I still got Adam and Eve. They can make more kids, but you're done, you son of Satan, right? No, I didn't say that, because everything needs to be rectified. So what good is it if you just remove something from existence without giving it a chance to correct itself? That means God created something for nothing, and God never does that, you see. So the Lord cursed him that he should wander the earth for the shedding of blood and evil death. What is evil death? This means death by torture, not just... So, which leads us back to what it said in the Zohar, that Cain actually bit Abel to death. A one shot to the skull instantly kills you, especially based on the description of the stone being embedded into his forehead. That's straight up, lights out, painless. But to be bitten to death, I mean, you watch those nature documentaries, right? You see zebras or other animals getting mauled by lions or not tigers so much. I know, wolves, right? The animal's still alive and they're eating from it. Okay. So now you have your brother biting you to death, and because he's like, okay, this looks like it's working. He's in discomfort right now. I'll just continue doing this as I'm eating his blood, drinking his blood. You see the vampires. Okay. You get the idea. But to be bitten to death, every bite is excruciating as the blood is being spilled. Okay, so it's not fun. Cain said, Master of all the worlds, my sin is too great to bear, for it is irredeemable. That's amazing that he said that, okay? The Radal said, that this itself was remorse and repentance for what he had done, as the text says, and this was considered as tshuva for him. In other words, he said, Master of the universe, what I did was so terrible, there is nothing that I can possibly do to undo this or to rectify this, okay? In other words, to undo it, no. To correct it, yes. We'll get to it, don't worry. However, in his lifetime, it would not be complete. The rectification is also part of the redemption, and everything has to be paid in full. I wrote accidentally pain in full. That's where my mind was when I'm writing these things. And so we know that if this cannot be done in our lifetime, if any rectification cannot be done in our lifetime, we come back in different incarnations until we correct what we did in our previous lives. But we're done with that right now, so make this count. For instance, the soul that would be the very first born son of Adam and Eve within the Garden of Eden was that of Moses, actually, meaning Moses was a reincarnation of Abel. The first true-born child in the Garden of Eden from man and woman was the neshama of Moses, okay? So now this is our connection, by the way, with Moses. So listen to the text. Cain said before the Holy One, blessed be he, now will a certain righteous one rise in the earth and mention thy great name against me and slay me. If we've learned a little bit in the book of Exodus, we know exactly what we're talking about. Moses, how did Moses kill the Egyptian that was beating Datan? With his fists, with his staff. He didn't even have the staff yet. He used God's name. This is what Cain is telling God. He also knew the future. One is going to rise and kill me. The Egyptian was a reincarnation of Cain. Now we're already starting to see a rectification. Cain kills Abel. Now Abel kills Cain. And then again and again and again. And we'll see this. That same Egyptian who was beating Datan, as that Egyptian was also sleeping with Datan's wife. We learned about that. He got her pregnant. She bore a son, a mamzer, a bastard. The same one who would blaspheme the name of God in the wilderness. That son of the Egyptian man and the Israelite woman was yet another reincarnation of Cain, who got what was coming to him. Leviticus 24:10. Now the son of an Israelite woman, and he was the son of an Egyptian man, that would be that, went out among the children of Israel, and they quarreled in the camp, this son of the Israelite woman and an Israelite man. And the son of the Israelite woman, meaning the son of the Egyptian, pronounced the divine name and cursed. So they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shelomit, the daughter of Dibri of the tribe of Dan. Now we know her name. By the way, she was the only female in all the camp of Israel who did not handle herself like the daughter of the king. The only one. They placed him in the guardhouse until his sentence would be specified to them by the word of the Lord. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the blasphemer outside the camp, and all who heard his blasphemy shall lean their hands on his head, and the entire community shall stone him. And to the children of Israel you shall speak, saying, any man who blasphemes his God shall bear his sin. Venasa chat'o. Right? You see this? And one who blasphemously pronounces the name of the Lord, meaning if you call out God's name for no reason, shall be put to death. The entire community shall stone him. Convert and resident alike, if he pronounces the divine name, he shall be put to death. People think only cursing the name of God is considered blasphemy. But what about, see, this is, again, from where most of us, right, have seen or come from. What Christians don't understand, what Messianics don't understand, is that also attempting to pronounce the name of God is blasphemy. Penalties work different today as it was back then. Back then, the Shekhinah was there in the camp. God was right there. You did something wrong, boom, death. Today, wait, it's coming. How many times have we seen people try and spell out or pronounce We'll just refer to it as Yahoo right now. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Be it in English, in Hebrew, or feeling cute and writing it in ancient Hebrew. What's up with that, man? Seriously, or woman. That's blasphemy, and you're going to pay for it. It's written in the 5 books of Moses, but they don't, and especially in Leviticus, but it's okay. They don't believe in that stuff anyway, so surprise. The penalty is death in this world and in the world to come. However, even still within the life of Moses, the reincarnation of Abel, we see the beginning of Cain's redemption through his father-in-law, Jethro. That's right. Not only did he eventually take him in as a son, he imprisoned him for 10 years first, yes? But he was the first great figure to convert. Exodus 18, 10 and 12. Thereupon Jethro said, "Blessed is the Lord, Baruch Hashem, asher etziv etchem miyad Mitzrayim, who has rescued you from the hands of the Egyptians and from the hand of Pharaoh, who has rescued the people from beneath the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the deities." Nothing, only one, right? For with the thing that they plotted, he came upon them. Then Moses' father-in-law Jethro sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings to God, and Aaron and all the elders in Israel came to dine with Moses' father-in-law before God. You cannot break bread with an idolater, let alone have them sacrificed to God in the camp of Moses. You understand? Jethro became part of Israel. How do we know that he was from the spiritual line of Cain? Because he is also referred to as the Caini. Caini. Judges 1:16. And the children of Caini, the father-in-law of Moses, went up from the city of the date palms with the children of Judah in the wilderness of Judah. And Judges 4:11. Now Hever, the Kenite, had separated from the Kenites of the children of Chovav, the father-in-law of Moses. Okay. Another figure that was a reincarnation of Cain who tried to rise up and kill Moses, i.e. Abel, was Korach, who was swallowed up by the mouth of the earth that was created on the Sabbath eve. Genesis 4:11, and now you are cursed even more than the ground which opened its mouth to take your brother's blood from your hand. Numbers 16:30-32. But if the Lord creates a creation and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them and all that it is theirs, then they descend alive into the grave, you will know that these men have provoked the Lord. As soon as he finished speaking all these words, the earth beneath them split open. The earth beneath them opened its mouth and swallowed them and their houses and all the men who were with Korach and all his property. Abel's blood and Korach's posse, that took place where the earth opened, was in exactly the same place. Did God know this was going to happen? Of course, come on. He did, yes, obviously, which is why everything was created beforehand, as we can see. And this goes all the way forward to the great Rabbi Akiva. Who's Rabbi Akiva? When Moses was on Mount Sinai, God showed him what's going to happen with the Torah in the future, and he showed him Rabbi Akiva and said Moses sat in the 8th row of his students. 8, because why 8? Because we know what the number 8 means. So he sat and he watched Rabbi Akiva, and Moses is like, why aren't you giving him the Torah? Where's this stuff coming from? He's saying amazing things. He goes, actually, that's from you. He's going to extrapolate upon that, but yeah. So here we see Moses and Rabbi Akiva. So what's the connection with Rabbi Akiva to Cain? Rabbi Akiva was a son of converts. His parents converted to Judaism. His father was from the spiritual line of Cain. And Akiva, growing up until he was age 40 years old, he detested Torah and Talmidei Chachamim. He admitted himself to his students in the Talmud. He said, before I got into Torah, I hated Torah. And I hated all the Talmidei Chachamim, and I would bite them, like a donkey. And they said, Rabbi, don't you mean like a dog? He goes, no, a dog doesn't break bone, only flesh, but a donkey will break bone. That's how much I hated them in order to bite them. So now we see biting over here. And the great Rabbi Akiva now redeemed his father, but also the line of Cain as well. You see this? It only took 4,200 years. And also, something else very cool, which actually makes sense. Genesis 4:14. Check this out. Behold, you have driven me today off the face of the earth, said Cain to God, right? Hen gerashta oti hayom me'al pnei adama, umipanecha aster, vahiti na vanad ba'aretz, v'haya kol matzoni yargoni. Okay, this is great. Behold, you have driven me off the face of the earth, and I shall be hidden from before you, and I will be a wanderer and exile in the land, ba'aretz. So we have pnei adama, the face of the earth, and aretz, and I will wander ba'aretz. Okay, doesn't work in the English. The cities which Cain built and the civilizations he began, because we can read this in the text in the Torah, were of beings that looked like him and his wife, right? Cain looked more like the serpent than he did man, right? It was the serpent, Satan, serpent, mixed with a little bit of woman over there. What do you think his twin sister looked like? Probably like him too. What do you think their children looked like? You see what I'm saying? He started civilizations where all these beings looked like him and his wife, who both look more like the serpent than human beings today, off the face of the earth, Adama, roaming in the realm of Eretz. Do you see that? In other words, you have off the, Cain went beneath ground to the beneath the ground civilizations. Plain text, but if we know what we're talking about, if we know what we're reading, we can understand this. What did the Holy One, blessed be He, do? He took one letter from the 22 letters and put it upon Cain's arm, that he should not be killed, as it is said in Genesis 4:15. And the Lord said to him, therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance will be wrought upon him sevenfold. And the Lord placed a mark on Cain, that no one who find him slay him. There are many different opinions as to which of the 22 letters God gave Cain, as well as its placement, because it doesn't say which arm. In other places it said that he also put it on his forehead. That's why there's, he had a horn on his forehead, so they thought he looked like an animal. No, he looked like an animal because he actually looked like a giant lizard probably, or a giant serpent, reptilian if you will. I don't know, but it more like the serpent than man. So let's see what's out there. We'll get a better idea. The Hebrew for our text says, Ma'asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, do, Natal ot achat, Natal, he took one letter, ot achat, me-22 otiyot, from the 22 letters, Sheba Torah, in the Torah, because the Torah is made up of 22 letters plus 5, which are the mansapach, the ending letters. Mem, Nun, Tzadik, Pei, and Chet. Chaf, excuse me. V'katav al zro'o shel Cain shelo yareg, and he wrote it on the arm or the hand of Cain that he won't be killed. Now, let's start breaking this down. Ot. Ot, what is ot? Ot means letter. But what else does ot mean? Ot hi leolam. It is an eternal sign, an eternal covenant. In other words, ot is a letter, but it's also a sign. And which letter from the Aleph Bet is known as the sign? Aleph Bet Gimel Dal all the way to the end. That will be the last letter, that which concludes the 22, and that is the letter Taf, like Tamir. In Hebrew, Taf Mem Yud Resh. So the sign would be the letter Taf. The letter Taf is unique that it represents death and resurrection. Mavet, Taf, and Tchia. Mot, Mavet, Tchia. Mavet, Tchia. Okay? So it represents death and life. In Tikkunei Zohar, it says that the letter he gave him was the 9th letter. Again, like I said, different places. So in Tikkunei Zohar, it says he gave him the 9th letter, which is the letter Tet. Tet and Taf sound the same. Ta, ta, ta. There's a Tamir with a Tet, and it's a different meaning to the word. In the Torah, it says Tamir v'ne'elam. That's what the Tet. But that Tamir, that means hidden and disappears. That ain't me. I'm Tamir with a Taf. Different thing. Okay, but in any case, it's a common name with a Tet. More so than with a Taf that I've seen. Okay, so Tet and Taf. So they sound the same. In English, they are both the letter T. And to spell the letter Tet, if you want to spell out Tet, it's 2 Tets. Tet and Tet. That's how you spell Tet. Where you spell Tav is Taf, Yud, and Vav. Tav. Okay? So if Tet equals numerically, if Tet equals 9, and in order to spell that out, you have Tet, 9 and 9, that's how much? That's 18. And what is 18 but the numerical value of life, chai, 18. That's why I've told you this before. Also 666. Why are they so afraid of 666? Because their pagan Bible tells them to do it, but actually it's a very good thing, right? So let them run from life and we'll embrace it. It's all good. As in, I'm granting this guy life so he can wonder and complete his correction for a time. The letter Tet also represents the word Tov, good, which has a numerical value of 17. Now watch this, and we've discussed this before, Genesis 47:28, and Jacob lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years. Vayechi Yaakov beretz Mitzrayim 17 shana. We are beginning to see that everything is correlated over here. So, his forehead, his arm, which arm, left, right. Some say the forehead, it would be the letter Vav, specifically from the Yud K, Vav K. You give him the letter Vav in the forehead. Although if that were the case, then he wouldn't die at all. Maybe he didn't, who knows, although it says that he did. We're not getting into that right now. That's a whole nother thing. So let's read Deuteronomy 6:8. Ukshaltem leot al yadecha vehayu letotafot bein einecha. And you shall bind them for a sign, leot, letter, no, sign, yes, upon your hand, and they shall be for ornaments between your eyes. Okay, so that's not what letotafot means, okay? This, of course, is part of the Jewish prayer. We say this in the Shema Yisrael. And this particularly refers to what? The tefillin. We wrap the tefillin on our arm, right? We put the box over here facing our heart. Facing our heart, we wrap it around, and then we put the head on, and we conclude with the hand. Okay, it's a whole thing. Which hand do we put the tefillin on? The left one. The right hand puts tefillin on the left hand. As it says, ukshaltam leot, as a sign. How do we know that it's the left and not the right? This is a tradition that has been passed down from Moses to Israel through the oral law. Nevertheless, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they put on tefillin. Like I said, they knew all the Torah and all the mitzvot, and they did it before it was even given, because they're like, wait, you're going to give this to our children for them to rectify the world? Let's start ourselves. And they did it, which is why they were who they were and are who they are. So we got leot, we have the sign on the arm. Okay, left one. What about the word totafot, translated as ornaments? Based on the letters alone, the simple text, let's break it down. Totafot is spelled tet, pei, taf. Totafot. Okay, so we have the letter taf, which is a sign. We have the letter pei, which is pe, actually. What is pe? Mouth. Stom tape. Shut your mouth, right? Okay, so pe is mouth, opening, gateway, and they're all true. The sign, the opening, the gateway to what? Tet and tet. 9 and 9, life. The sign is the gateway to life. I don't know. I'm already like doing this myself, but so far it makes sense. So again, something to think about over here. So let's get back to the vampire lore, shall we? Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says, and I found this part like whoa, okay. The dog which was guarding Abel's flock, excuse me, also guarded him from all the beasts of the field and all the fowl of the heavens. הכלב שהיה משמר צונו של הבל, הוא היה שומרו מכל חיית השדה ומעוף השמיים. If you read the Hebrew, you can understand this verse in two ways. The dog guarded Abel's corpse from the beasts and the birds, or the dog that guarded the beasts from the birds the dog that guarded Abel's flock was now guarding him from the beasts and the birds. Our sages say that it was very common, even back then, with Abel, to have a dog, the most loyal of all creatures, help with the shepherds. But it can also be read that this dog would then guard Cain from the beasts and the birds. As the Maharzu said, a dog was given to Cain as additional protection or security from those who might want to harm him. the hounds of hell, right? Who guard their vampire masters while they sleep. You see this? I was reading this this is crazy. Okay, although Cain had no problem at first, with the sun, right? Okay, but perhaps since he and his descendants went to the part of the world that was pitch black, Eretz, the center of it, they became creatures of the night. So afterwards, they couldn't be in the sunlight. I don't know, right? Who knows? The point is, all these stories, all of them, from the Greek and Roman mythology to the fiction of the New Testament, everything has been taken from the Torah. All these fairy tales, everything, all these Hollywood movies. There's a complete book. I forgot. If I can remember, I'll show you next time. And Arena has it. It shows Hollywood movies, all of them, the biggest ones to the small, everything, and where they are taken from in the Torah. A lot of these people, these writers, they're all Jews, So it's a never-ending source. Okay, so I thought that was very, very interesting. Now, Adam and his helper were sitting and weeping and mourning for him, and they did not know what to do with Abel, for they were unaccustomed to burial. Okay, here's the body of our son. What now, right? They were weeping not only because of his murder, death, kill. Anybody? Okay, fine. Let's see who gets that. If you get it, just write it underneath. I just want to know. But because they did not know what to do with his body. From this, we understand that Cain either tossed it in the trees or upon the rocks, or just put some dirt over him, but didn't actually bury him in the ground. Okay, this is how we can understand that. Furthermore, did God not tell Adam that when they would die, their body would become earth again, right? So what were they doing? They were sitting there, looking at his body, lying in the ground, waiting for this to happen. Still not knowing what to do. They're like, okay, he's not becoming earth. Maybe let's wait some more. No, not it. What do we do? A raven came. One of its raven friends was dead at its side. It took his fellow, dug in the earth, hid it, and buried it before them. This is how we and the world learned about burial from the raven. Adam said, like this raven will I act. He took the corpse of Abel and dug in the earth and buried it. Amazing. Or as David said in Psalms 119:99, Mikol melamdai hiskalti, from all my teachers I gained understanding, even from the ravens, right? The Holy One, blessed be He, gave a good reward to the ravens in this world. What reward did He give them? As we read in Psalms 145, everyone's eyes look to you with hope, and you give them their food in its time. You open your hands and satisfy every living thing with its desire. Poteach et yadecha, poteach pe, specifically poteach petach pe, mouth opening. Poteach et yadecha umasbir lechol chai ratzon. Okay, when they bear their young and see that they are white, they fly from them, thinking that they are the offspring of a serpent. Okay, so what exactly does this mean? The Radal says that the raven is cruel, specifically to its young, in this sense, but that's only for a short while, until their color changes from white to black, meaning when a raven hatches from its shell, the bird is actually white, okay? He also says that in the book of Reincarnation, a person who is cruel to his fellow will be reincarnated as a raven. The eggs of the serpent are similar to those of a crow, of a raven, which is why sometimes the serpent lays its eggs in the crow's nest for the crow to look after it until it's born, and then, oh, look, dinner right there, you know? The other thing is that ravens are black, yes, we know this, and they are anything but stupid. They are highly intelligent birds who recognize faces, see patterns, and can even go hunting and bringing you food if you teach them. Think in the world today, okay, right? So you have two black parents, right? If the mother gives birth to a white baby, yet, the father's going to be like, and, let's have this conversation. You know what I mean, right? So when the raven sees a white baby, he's like, that ain't mine, and I ain't paying for it. Peace, I'm out, right? And still, The Holy One, blessed be He, gives them their sustenance without lack, as it is said even more specifically than what we read before. Job 38:41, who prepares for the raven its prey? When his young cry out to God, they wonder for lack of food? No, they do not, because God gives it to them. Moreover, that raven should be given upon the earth for their sakes, and the Holy One, blessed be He, answers them, as it is said even more specifically still in Psalms 147:9, He gives the animal its food to the young ravens which call out. Which animal are we speaking of specifically over here? Our sages say the bear. Why the bear? Because they need more food than most. They eat tremendous amounts, right? And the mother does not. At first, it says, in one case it says the mother doesn't produce milk to give them. Another case it says, I really don't know, but maybe you could, I don't know. Another case it says she only produces a little bit milk to give them, but basically they need to eat and they need a lot of food. So God takes care of the bears, specifically the bears that our sages are talking about. And for the young raven, God brings down the rain. God makes it rain for little raven babies. And all this because the raven taught us how to honor and to bury our dead. And that's today's class. So stick around for next week. Next week, we're going to be discussing the lineage of Seth, going all the way to the generations of the flood, fallen angels and all that good stuff. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So as always, thank you all for joining me. Have a wonderful week and have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye.